news alert. The Islamic State savages now say they are responsible for mass murder in London this weekend. A special early start of Fox Report Now. I'm Harris Faulkner. Hate that seems to know no boundaries. The United Kingdom rocked again by terrorist thugs, thousands of miles away. But we know how they feel, the British, right here at home at this hour. The details on what has unfolded and developed on this Sunday. The first crime scene, the iconic London Bridge. A van drove down it. Attackers from inside that van jumped out and began to stab people. The attackers were also reportedly wearing fake bomb vests. Well, what about the latest as police continue to investigate? I mentioned the first crime scene, the iconic London Bridge, but we feather out from there because there was more than one crime scene.
It was essentially one large crime scene. If you look at the way it's cordoned off here in London, that starts over at the London Bridge, and then the attackers ran with their knives to pretty much the location where I am now. What we know from the crime scene, they towed away the van that was used in the attack. Police have been going very slow and methodically through this crime scene, gathering up all the evidence they can. We know that they also took what appear to be fake suicide vests. The apparent motivation of those fake suicide vests, particularly in areas where you may have a lot of soccer hooligans who would be primed for a fight, well, you would scare off anybody who would try to tackle the attackers and take away the knife. Harris?
And I know police say that they are working now to get through the 12 or so people that they have already arrested. Some of them women, some of them they have let go without charging. What is the latest on what they think the attackers may have been able to get, whether it was help, support, what?
That is the big unknown right now, and we've heard that from the police on the record earlier today. They know that they believe that they have killed all of the people who directly participated in the attack. What they don't really know at this stage is how extensive the support network was. As you mentioned, there were a couple of boroughs that were raided, or neighborhoods that were raided, the Barking neighborhood and the East Ham neighborhood, and that's where they picked up these 12 individuals. As you mentioned, some of them have been released. Our sister network, Sky News, reporting that an additional 4 women were picked up. It's possible, though, that they weren't picked up under suspicion. They were picked up for their own protection. Harris?
Mike Tobin, thank you very much. And we mentioned at the top of the hour that ISIS is claiming responsibility, but always with this, investigators want to try to figure out exactly what really happened to trigger this and who was behind it, because they often can take responsibility for whatever they want. So as British intelligence works on that, the leaders there are racing to stop similar or copycat attacks. Terrorists recently have been going after soft targets. As you know, we've been reporting it, things like concerts, which are open areas with less pinpoint security, often like crowded streets or concert halls. Those spaces present special challenges for police. Former FBI special agent in charge, Ron Hosko, from earlier about preventing this sort of thing.
The FBI has spoken for a couple of years now in terms of what's the distance between flash and bang. How much time do I have to intervene between the moment you get inspired and the moment you actually take action? And that's where the FBI is trying to get in front of and get in the middle to do that interdiction.
Boy, that's such an interesting way of putting it, Garrett Tenney, joining us from Washington now, that idea of between flash and bang, between the inspiration and carrying it out. What more are we learning about the investigation?
Well, here's British security sources are reporting that very early indications suggest that these attacks may have been pulled together on very short notice. And that's a big reason why police are quickly trying to determine if the attack was simply a one-off or part of a larger plot with additional attacks that could be coming. Today, London police said they are still working to confirm the identities of the 3 attackers, but they have already begun digging into their backgrounds to learn everything they can.
We are making significant progress now in identifying the 3 attackers and confirming the fact that there were no other suspects at the scene when the attack was carried out. Work is ongoing to understand more about them, about their connections, and about whether they were assisted or supported by anyone else.
And as investigators look into the attackers' connections, they are trying to find out if the attackers were acting alone or if they were part of a larger cell that's planning additional attacks. That's why electronic devices found on the attackers, if there were any, will be key to the investigation in learning who they were talking to, getting help from, and are there any connections to terror groups. Police have not said if any of the attackers were known or were on their radar prior to the attacks, and that's something they're going to be finding out as they fully identify these attackers.
Yeah, Garrett, you're talking about those electronic signatures. They're looking for human-type signatures, too, because now ISIS is coming forth, and often they will do this, but we really do need to know who was behind this in order to thwart any other copycat attacks, because we have to know who's on the ground.
Exactly, and you mentioned we've seen this before, that the terror group will claim responsibility for attacks that it wasn't directly behind, and that's something that's going to come out in the course of this investigation, whether these individuals were simply inspired by ISIS or if they were part of an ISIS cell. Counterterrorism analysts have told us, though, that just before the attacks, a message was posted to dozens of pro-ISIS channels on the Telegram messaging app calling for Muslims to kill Christians during the holy month of Ramadan, using knives, guns, and trucks. Again, though, at this point, we do not know if that post was simply opportunistic or if it was directly related to this attack. Harris.
All right, we've got General Jack Keane coming up. So I wrote down your question, the difference between ISIS-inspired and ISIS-supported. So we'll get into it because of you, Garrett Tenney. Thank you for your reporting. Appreciate it.
You got it.
Well, even as London grieves, Manchester is trying to heal. Remember, it was just a few days ago with Manchester, UK. Ariana Grande held a benefit concert just a short time ago. It wrapped up, raising money for the victims of the attack on one of her shows last month. And security was tight. Defiant music fans packed that stadium, so many young faces. One particularly moving moment we all watched together on our iPhones, many of us, because it was streaming live. The Black Eyed Peas rallied the crowd behind the event's namesake, One Love.
All these people who are fearless, who came for love, we will not be separated. One love. We only got
Brian Yanis is following the story for us live from our New York City newsroom. He comes on set with me now. This streamed live all over YouTube, a lot of different places. I mean, those were the parameters for being able to watch this. And it felt to me that it drew you in even more because you had it in your hands.
This wasn't just Manchester, this was the entire world, backed by the world's biggest stars, really sending a message of joy, inspiration, and defiance in the face of evil. And again, just a day after the attacks that we saw in London last night, really 50,000 people at this stadium, at the old Trafford Cricket Grounds, in remembrance of the 22 killed and more than 100 injured during the suicide bombing attack 2 weeks ago at pop singer Ariana Grande's concert. And tonight, many young girls with their parents sang and they cried together. Others danced with British first responders, heroes over the course of these recent attacks. And really, Ariana Grande spearheaded this concert. Days ago, she had visited injured young fans at a Manchester Children's Hospital. The 23-year-old, she sang her hits, also some duets with others, and in a particularly emotional moment, she embraced and sang with a young girl and a children's choir behind her.
I love you guys so much, and I think that the kind of love and unity that you're displaying is the medicine that the world really needs right now. So I want to thank you for being just that. And I want to thank you for coming tonight. I love you so much.
Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus were among the many stars tonight. Bieber was particularly emotional. He sang Love Yourself, and just listen.
Love. I just want to take this moment to honor the people that were lost or that were taken. We love you so much. To the families, we love you so much. Put both hands up to honor those people right now. Everybody say, we honor you. And we love you. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
In a time of darkness, music heals. In Coldplay, Pharrell Williams, Katy Perry, and British stars Liam Gallagher and Robbie Williams also made appearances, and all proceeds go to the victims' families directly. And we're talking, expecting millions. The last time I checked on Facebook, it was over $250,000 just on the live Facebook stream on Ariana Grande's page.
You know, it was hard to miss as people at Fox were watching, and we watched together all the red, white, and blue from here at home, and how we had walked out our love all those thousands of miles away from America. I caught it, though, Justin Bieber changing that we lost to whom were taken in terms of the victims. A very different message. They were taken from us. How about security for this? There were 50,000, you said?
There were 50,000 people there, but at the same time, there was a Manchester United soccer match. So we're talking about 110,000 people within this just a just right across the street.
Wow.
So this was a really big security issue, but they had security checkpoints. Everyone was checked. Lots of armed security officers. Nobody was really, they were told not to bring bags. So this was a big event, but luckily the Greater Manchester Police says there were no major incidents today.
Yeah, so one of the pieces of video that we showed, because we're going to get into this later in the hour, but I want to touch on it with you, that ring around the rosy ring. I mean, we couldn't hear the audio, but they were gleeful with that one Manchester police officer. When you talk about what happened in London and how fast those officers moved in to take down the people who were driving that van and stabbing the people on London Bridge, and you talk about the response in Manchester as well, I mean, there is a different tone when you see a police officer now in the United Kingdom. I mean, you see people embracing them. We've seen this here in our own country after things have happened.
Yeah, we felt this here after 9/11 and in Boston, and it was just a beautiful thing to see there. These officers hadn't really seen anything like this recently, back to back in this way. Yeah. And I think also the fact that these victims were young people, children in many of these cases, in terms of the first concert, really hit home tonight. It was really interesting and really beautiful to see the young girls with their parents there tonight. Many parents said that they were nervous. Especially parents of those choir members that were there. They said, I was nervous of going. I wanted to call my son or my daughter and text them, but it was important that they were there. And I think that was just a great show of strength there tonight for the entire world.
Thank you for bringing that. We appreciate it, Brian.
Thank you.
Always good to see you. Well, right now, sharing intelligence among countries, a crucial piece of the puzzle. Why our next guest says leaks from the White House are hurting the fight against terrorism. And we've seen an increase in using cars and vans and trucks as deadly weapons. So how do we protect against these kinds of attacks? I'm Harris Faulkner. You're watching a special Fox report. Stay tuned. Investigators have picked up a dozen people in raids and arrests since terror struck London less than 24 hours ago.
The investigation is progressing at a pace, and officers from the Met's Counter-Terrorism Command and the National Counter-Terrorism Policing Network are working with UK intelligence partners relentlessly to piece together exactly what happened last night. We've already made good progress, but there of course remains much more to do.
U.S. officials tell Fox News the threats targeting Europe right now are among the worst they've seen in a decade. Joining me now is Michael Pugent, a former intel officer and adjunct fellow at the Hudson Institute. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. I want to start off with a comment that you made to one of our producers about how the leaks in the White House and those classified leaks then making it into the bloodstream of the press, members of the press not being responsible with that material and then leaking classified material further, is hurting the fight against terror.
It is. Thanks for having me on, Harris. One of the most important things is intelligence sharing with our allies. Our allies weren't concerned that Trump shared a credible threat of ISIS plan to attack commercial airlines with Lavrov. They were upset that they were hearing members of our intelligence community with top secret clearances leaking information to the press. And then after the Manchester attack, our intelligence community and law enforcement leaking Salman Abedi's name and leaking details about the bomb and the detonator before they had a chance to put the net around Salman Abedi's people. So it's very important.
Okay, so May 25th, right after the Manchester attacks, we saw British police and through their prime minister saying, you know what, the leaks are really going to hurt our ability to share information. Theresa May, the prime minister, said she had a word for our president. What changed after that? Because I'm thinking now from reports that they're sharing information. I'm thinking now something must have changed.
Oh, yeah, they got reassurances from Secretary Kelly of Department of Homeland Security. They got reassurances from McMaster and Mattis, and also from the president. So it's very important. Like you said, the chatter from these terrorist organizations has been at a decade-high level, and we need to be able to share that information with our allies as they face this terrorist scourge in Europe. So we just have to...
I want to be careful how I word this because these are not my words. The president has called certain members of the media enemies, if you will, because of this leak situation that flows through them to the public. But how difficult is it? I mean, you're fighting and trying to capture and harness one enemy on one side, but also your own homeland press at times is working against you through these leaks and feathering them out to the public. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it seems like there are individuals in the intelligence community that are more concerned about hurting the president than they are concerned about protecting our national security, and more important, the relationships we have with foreign allies. You cannot defeat terror. It's hard enough as it is if you can't share intel with our allies, because our allies are worried about the U.S. press exposing their assets in the field, their assets in Raqqa, in Mosul and other areas where ISIS controls territory. You can't have that risk. There should be no person holding a top secret clearance that is willing to share information with the press that actually hurts our efforts against ISIS and hurts our national security and more importantly, our relationships with our allies.
What needs to happen now that isn't happening? I mean, I've heard you say that we're facing now some of the worst threats against Europe than we've ever seen. Why?
Well, we have to also weigh intelligence. So Turkey's provided intelligence in the past to our European allies. And because it came from Turkey, it wasn't weighed accordingly, even though Turkish intelligence was right about an attack.
Why?
Well, because we put a different weight. We put more of a weight on U.S. signals intelligence and U.S. intel from the CIA, and less weight on something generated by an Iraqi intelligence service, an Afghan intelligence service, or a Turkish intelligence service. We need to weigh the intelligence and see who was right about an attack, and that's so important. Intelligence sharing, if you have the intel and you can't give it to somebody to action it, to make it actionable, there's no reason you're not doing anything with it, and that's one of the biggest problems. We sit on it because we don't want to share it, and then nothing happens.
Wow, that is really interesting. I mean, the different rating or grade that you give intel based on the country I have heard about, but then to doubt that, that's very interesting. I want to give you a last word on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so the Abbottabad raid against Osama bin Laden, the Afghan intel services were telling us exactly where he was, but because they were the Afghan intelligence service, we put a different weight on them. We thought they weren't credible and they were just simply being political and telling us what we wanted to hear because they didn't like the Pakistani government. Well, you have to weigh those things. You need to validate sources, and we do that. We did that in Iraq, and we were effective. You have to do that everywhere. You validate sources based on the information, and you assign appropriate weights based on the percentage of being right.
Wow, this is so fascinating. Before I let you go real quickly, this is time-consuming. Are we able to, in quick enough pace, to do the kind of intel vetting, I guess, for lack of a better word, that it takes then to act on that information and try to prevent what we saw in Manchester, prevent what we saw on that London Bridge, and God forbid have to do it time and time again here too?
Well, the issue is even if it's 100% accurate, sometimes law enforcement and sometimes intelligence services overseas are inundated with intel. They don't know what's right, and they just don't have the resources to find out. So a lot of times after the attacks, you find out these three individuals were on our radar. We knew that they were involved with ISIS, and we just didn't do anything about it because we couldn't. We just can't track everybody. And that's one of the biggest problems. We have too many people associated with ISIS running around Western countries, and our law enforcement is not able to keep up with it, and that needs to be addressed.
All right. Michael Pregent, I could talk with you all hour. Thank you very much. We'll bring you back another time. No, absolutely.
Thank you, Harris.
We have an opportunity, though, to bring in General Jack Keane on the heels of what Michael really is schooling us on. So we'll be doing that coming up. London putting the spotlight on security at home with the terror attack coming just days after the Trump administration asked the U.S. Supreme Court to reinstate the travel ban. What these attacks could mean for our travel and airport security coming up.
We've already bought the tickets for everything, and we're staying right in the city. So, you know, again, you can't stop living. You just have to go and hope for the best.
London's terror attacks just last night are joining a growing list of cities around the globe where vehicles have been used as weapons. Like last night's involving a white van plowing into pedestrians on the London Bridge, killing at least 7, injuring nearly 50 others, some with life-threatening injuries. So we are bracing for updates on that. Here's some of what we've brought you. Since last January at a mosque in France, in July Bastille Day in Nice, in November at Ohio State University, In December, a market attack in Berlin. This January, there was a soldier attack in Jerusalem. And last month, the Westminster Bridge attack, which looks similar in the fact that a vehicle was going down a bridge to last night. Joining us now to talk about this is General Jack Keane, a retired four-star general. He's also the chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, a Fox News military analyst as well. General, always good to have you along as news is developing on this. It seems like there is a trend that's developing now using a vehicle. Why?
Well, it's easy to use. You don't have to construct a bomb. You don't have to find an assault rifle. Grenades are more difficult to come along with, and ISIS is onto that. I don't think you need me on here to talk about why they're using vehicles. I mean, the major problem we're facing here is a strategic issue. And the strategic issue is the failure of leadership in these national leaders who do not have the political will and the moral courage to talk honestly to their own people and also to commit themselves to defeat this threat. We've got a global jihad on our hands. We've got now, 5-6 years ago, 3,000 people killed on average by the radical Islamists. Today it's almost 30,000. We have threefold more countries involved in it. They've declared war against Western civilization and the world as we know it. And they are at war with us, and they are absolutely committed to it. They've got fighters to do it, and they've got tens of thousands of sympathizers and supporters. But what is happening? Every one of those European leaders, except when May today seemed to change her tune a little bit, but I'm still skeptic, most other leaders in the world, the fact is that they're not at war with ISIS. They don't have their population on that footing. There have been 33 attacks in 8 NATO countries, and NATO's not at war with ISIS. That's pretty shameful.
Yeah. And I appreciate what you're saying. You know, we don't need to go to you to talk about the truck situation or the van situation, but we did see something a little different last night, and that was like a deployment of these savages getting out of that van and stabbing people. Hand-to-hand combat, General. That takes it up a different notch as well, and then you see ISIS come out and claim responsibility.
Well, there's nothing particularly sophisticated about it. I mean, what's particularly sophisticated is when they can go into some place and kill 90 or 100 people with bombs. That is sophisticated and wound 400. A truck, why there's no barriers on that bridge like there is in New York City on every bridge that we have, or why there's not police on that bridge, I have no explanation for it. If we want to get into this tactical stuff, that's what you want to talk about, I'll talk about it. But the fact of the matter is, you got to encourage your population. When the people, these terrorists have knives and guns, fight back. Don't hide behind a chair. Use it. Use a bottle. Use a knife. Fight back. Not everybody can, but those who are willing to will encourage others to do it. But that won't solve the problem. This is a leadership problem. This is a strategy problem. This is a commitment of resources problem. This is the fact that we've got Muslim neighborhoods in European communities that are bona fide safe havens, where these radicals operate, and they're supported by tens of thousands of sympathizers. And we've got to go in there and use good police work, good intelligence work, penetrate madrasas, penetrate intelligence centers, intellectual centers, penetrate the mosques. And then we've got to get the good people in that community to work with us. And we got to figure out why in Manchester, for example, is the unemployment rate 12.8% when in the UK it's only 5%? Why is it 25 to 30% in the no-go areas in France and Belgium when it's considerably less throughout the rest of France and Belgium? And the reason is because the mainstream youth in those communities cannot get access to education, Harris, and they can't get access to jobs.
So these are some of the same things that were said, and you're talking about Molenbeek in Belgium, where we saw some of the Paris attackers last year massing in that community when authorities were looking for them, and right there in open sight, some of them. But I want to move on to this country and talk a little about what's happening in America, because I visited Minneapolis. I was on the air there for many years, so I knew about certain neighborhoods in Minneapolis and what they've done to attack the very things that you're talking about, to get people in the communities to actually work with police. It's very difficult to do. You brought up Theresa May saying, finally enough is enough. We want to play that and then bring you back in. Let's watch together.
Since the emergence of the threat from Islamist-inspired terrorism, Our country has made significant progress in disrupting plots and protecting the public. But it is time to say enough is enough. Everybody needs to go about their lives as they normally would. Our society should continue to function in accordance with our values. But when it comes to taking on extremism and terrorism, things need to change.
All right, so she's in the position to change them. What do you think she means? And what needs to be changed?
She has to have an education with a population about radical Islam. Educate them about the ideology, the belief system, what's wrong with it, what the characteristics of it, so they can all identify with it. And also commit the nation to the fact that we are now at war, because they are at war with us. And as I said, something has to be done about the Muslim communities. Most all of them are Muslims. They come from Muslim communities, and they're known by the police to some degree. That we have to penetrate them in that area, but we also have to befriend the good Muslims in that area so that we don't let youths be drawn into this radicalization. But we have to be involved in those communities if we're going to do that. These communities, you know, these are failed policies that the Europeans have. We don't have them. Open borders, mass immigration with no vetting whatsoever.
Well, there's some in this country in the last presidential election who were calling for open borders. Okay, so I mean, it is certainly something that we can talk about in this country and be aware of. Real quickly before I let you go, General, because I've not had a back and forth with you in a while like this. You're very impassioned at this moment, and I want to get your thought, because we've gone beyond the strategy and the methodology of fighting the enemy now. We're going down a different road. This is policy with you, and it's a good place to be, because I can ask you about the travel ban. Do we need a 120-day stay or so to vet better, to learn how to do this better? Is it okay then to focus on those 6 Muslim majority countries? Do we need to add some more to the list? Your thoughts?
Well, that depends on the intelligence community to determine that. The reason why those 6 countries are on the list is because we can't do extreme vetting there, because there's no way to vet. I mean, the problem is either you shut it all down. The problem is we have no embassies in those countries. There's no system. There's no procedure there. That's why they're on a list. Obama had them on a list, but he didn't call it a travel ban. Right. Listen, yes, we have to be able to control people coming into our country that are a threat to us. And
do we need to broaden out the list? Because, you know, the 9/11 attackers didn't come from any of those 6 countries. It gets complicated. I mean, Saudi Arabia, it gets complicated.
It's not complicated.
Can we add them to the list?
No, of course not. We have the second best intelligence cooperation we have in the Middle East is with Saudi Arabia. The first is with Israel. We have a huge vetting system in Saudi Arabia. It is not an issue. Was it a 9/11 issue? Yeah, of course. But they were in Afghanistan is where they came from. They happened to be Saudi Arabians who had committed to radical Islam. We get the issue all mixed up here. That's not the issue. The other thing that we have to do from a policy perspective, when radical Islamists have a geographic safe haven, like they have in Syria, and they've had it, Harris, since 2012. It's 5 years. We should crush that with a sense of urgency and passion and be very violent about it. It's territory that they're holding.
Can we get it done?
We should have had it done in 2015. And the Arabs in the region offered it to President Obama a couple of times, and he always said no. Why? Because it would have meant U.S. combat troops on the ground. We should have done that. We should get on with it now. It was out of that area that came the motivation and inspiration for these attacks. It's from Syria that they grew into 30 other nations.
Oh, wow. General Keane, thank you very much. We'll
Good
talk
talking,
again
Harris.
soon.
Take care. Right. Bye-bye.
The White House and Homeland Security monitoring the events out of London. President Trump offering his condolences to British Prime Minister Theresa May and pledging U.S. support. Kristen Fisher now live at the White House. Kristen, a deep conversation with Jack Keane to follow, but take it away.
Well, Harris, you know, keep in mind this is the 3rd time in less than 3 months that President Trump has had to call the British Prime Minister and talk to her about a terror attack in her country. And remember, the two of them had just sat down at the NATO summit in Brussels 10 days ago to talk about the bombing in Manchester. Now this. Well, today he's offering her the full support of the U.S. government, and so did his national security advisor, H.R. McMaster, about an hour ago. Listen to this.
What I'd like to do is reiterate America's heartfelt condolences to the British and the Afghan people, and also to reiterate our unshakable resolve to stand with them in the face of recent terrorist attacks. These latest atrocities underscore the urgency of our shared challenges. To our British and Afghan brothers and sisters, you are in our thoughts and in our prayers.
Now, right now, President Trump is at the White House, but tonight he'll be heading out to speak at an event here in D.C., so he could speak about the terror attack for the very first time in a few hours, Harris.
All right, Kristen, thank you very much. We just all heard British Prime Minister Theresa May condemning those behind the attacks in London. She's calling for new action, increased measures to stop the future attacks. You heard General Jack Keane weighing in on what that ought to look like. So what more can any government do? Of course, we're faced with the threats as well. We're going to talk about it with my next guest. Stay close. Let's bring in our political panel and focus on some of the domestic issues and worldwide issues going on right now. Ed Rollins, former campaign manager for the Reagan-Bush ticket in 1984, former chief White House political advisor to President Reagan, and a Fox News contributor. Always good to see you, Ed. Also joining us, Judith Miller, who I will call Judy, if she'll let me, adjunct fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, because that's how she and I roll. Pulitzer Prize-winning author and also a Fox News contributor. Boy, I tell you, it has been a horrendous weekend in two senses, if you will. One, British had said that something was imminent, and they were right. The other is that these were citizens in a soft target type situation as these men drove across the London Bridge, which is iconic and might be a hard target, but then into another area. Ed Rollins, I want to come to you first and just talk a little bit about the response last night.
Well, the response was superb, and Judy wrote a wonderful article on how effective the police had been and how quickly they responded. But the problem is that this potential is there everywhere. Terrorism is something that we're going to have to learn to live with until we destroy it, and we have to destroy it over a longer period of time. We have to educate people. But the critical thing here is the police in Great Britain basically reacted very quickly. 8 minutes after the first call, they had finished off the three terrorists. But in the meantime, they had done a lot of damage to people. Terrorism is exactly that. They go out to make everybody unnervous, unruly, and I think to a certain extent, whatever it takes for our intelligence support, whatever it takes for our law enforcement support, we as Americans have to support that.
Judy, you know, Ed talked about what you've written this weekend, and it is phenomenal in this sense as well, not just recognizing those police, but we've been reading reports that they were kind of thin because they're spread so thin. There's so much going on, and the imminent nature of more attacks since Manchester and the Ariana Grande concert just a couple of weeks ago left them feeling that way. But boy, they stepped up, and you wrote about it today. Some of the details from you that you want to point out.
Well, this is, Harris, as you said, and as Ed was kind enough to mention, the very slender silver lining of this latest terror attack, but an effective response from the police. The fact that 8 minutes passed from the time that the van was spotted on the bridge, starting to mow people down, to the confrontation and killing of 3 terrorists is an astonishingly quick reaction from, as you point out, a group of people who have been very thinly stretched. Now, they are aided by the presence of 500,000 surveillance cameras in London. Now, the existence of surveillance cameras is very, very controversial in our country, but I think in London tonight and in Manchester, you will see rather a consensus developing that this kind of surveillance enhances the police's ability to chase terrorists once they commit their act. Everything now depends on the Brits stepping up their intelligence, as we have done in New York City and throughout the United States, to prevent the kind of attacks that we're seeing not only in Manchester and London, but also throughout Europe, Germany, France, Sweden. That's what comes next, and I think that's one of the things that Theresa May was talking about today.
You know, one of the things, too, that we learned about those fake bomb vests that they were wearing, you know, people, your response, your emotional, your panic response even goes up, because you're thinking, even if I can get away, and we've got some of this on the screen, even if I can get away, if somebody's got a fake bomb vest, Great if it's fake. If it's not, that has collateral damage. We just saw that in Manchester at that concert. So this was a layering, Ed. I mean, it was, you're asking people to run, hide, and tell. That's what the Brits were asking. General Jack Keane is saying, if you can fight, fight.
Well, first of all, you have to have due diligence. You have to go out and basically be looking, when you send your kids out to concerts or graduations or whatever, have them be aware of their surroundings and always kind of in their head say, gee, if something happened here, where can I escape? Where can I run to? Where can I protect myself? A sad state of affairs. But these are terrorists. These are suicide people. That's a mindset we don't understand. We value life. The idea that you can go out and kill yourself because you think you're going to get to a higher place in the world, or the afterworld, is just so totally contrary to us. And that's what these people do. Terror is exactly that. It's a long time use of a threat, and it's a whole different thing for us. They're going to come back here. There's a lot of people probably in this country already that are plotting and scheming, and it doesn't take a whole lot. A car, basically a bunch of knives, and they killed 7, probably another 20 or 30 will be very severely wounded and may die before this is over. And I think we just have to basically be on our guard and support our law enforcement and our intelligence support.
I want to step in real quickly before I have to let you both go. The politics of this at home, and the president with his immigration pause that he wants to reinstate now, executive order second time around. Your thought, Ed?
Well, he's not doing this to basically because he doesn't like Muslims. He's doing this because he sees this, as President Obama did before, that there's a terrorist activity that goes on, and we have to protect ourselves at the border. And no better place than there is.
Is there a better way he can sell it?
Well, he hasn't sold it very well, and he has to sell it. And equally as important, I hope the court very quickly gets this thing through. They're taking his rhetoric. This is partisan politics at its worst, and I think at the end of the day...
Yeah, but we're caught in the middle of it.
We're all caught in the middle of it, but at the end of the day, it's too important to us to get past this stuff and do what's right for this country and do what's right.
Real quickly, I want to give you, Judy, the last word on this very topic. Go ahead.
I just don't think that it was appropriate for the President of the United States, who should have been offering condolences to the British public and to saluting the British police, to start out using this event to promote his own agenda of a Muslim ban. I would simply point out that the terrorist in Manchester was the bomber, a sophisticated attack, unlike what happened in London. That man was a British citizen born in Britain, and the Muslim ban would not apply to the UK.
First of all, we don't call it a Muslim ban. It is a pause in immigration. And yeah, okay, so we'll just start there. But we'll leave it there as well. Ed and Judy,
we'll see what the courts have to say about this.
Well, we'll see.
All right, we'll see.
Thank you.
President Trump pushing for courts to reinstate his pause in immigration for 120 days to vet people coming into this country better. We'll talk about it more. Stay close. The president, Will Carr, is live at Los Angeles International Airport. Will?
And Harris, President Trump has maintained all along that the travel ban that he wants to see implemented is all about the safety and the security of Americans. And with that in mind, he took to Twitter just a short time after the attack in London, tweeting, "We need to be smart, vigilant, and tough. We need the courts to give us back our rights. We need the travel ban as an extra level of safety." The ban would stop people from 6 countries from entering the U.S. for 90 days. Those countries are Iran, Syria, Sudan, Libya, Somalia, and Yemen. This is the second version of the ban. You may remember that the first sparked protests across the country. The second, though, is still controversial as it lands in front of the Supreme Court, which is now tilting conservative now that Judge Neil Gorsuch has taken his place on the bench. The Trump administration is asking to be able to implement the ban immediately. It's unclear exactly when the Supreme Court will weigh in. What is clear is that there are groups that are hell-bent on destruction, both in Europe and here in the United States. Take a listen to Senator Roy Blunt.
You've got some groups that are looking at a big play, like taking down an airliner. You've got others who need very little support, very little planning, and can do incredible damage, which is actually, in many ways, almost more of a terrorism, because you go anywhere, do anything.
Will Carr, thank
Critics
you very
say
much.
that the ban is racist, and they also say that
thank you very much, Will.